right, everybody, I just recorded today's tilt. We're going to learn a little bit about Florence Nightingale, MLK, punching through the target. Jump on the tilt with me now. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the tilt, the things I learned today. And fun one today. We're getting right into that book by Ryan Holiday, Right Things Right Now. And talking about Florence Nightingale and what it was that made her successful. Now, for those of you who know me or have listened to the channel for a while, that Cybertruck in the background is a bit of a surprise. Later this week, I'm going to walk through that decision as a part of the things I learned today. And so watch for that coming up on Friday. But in Florence Nightingale, everybody thinks about her like in the Longfellow poem, like she was this angel just floating about in the hospitals, bringing, kindness and care to the wounded and the sick. But she was like, she learned initially she had to become competent first. And you see that early on, and then she started to fix smaller and smaller problems until they gave her bigger and bigger responsibility. And she was kind of like, I don't know what you'd say, like you kind of picture the person coming in like, this is how we do it here. You don't do it this other way, because she was finding that these people cared, but didn't have the skills, didn't have the competency, didn't have simple things like keeping bed sheets clean for the sake of how patients would feel and how they would heal. But the big aha, as I read it, is like, yeah, people confuse the fact now that the passion for what they're passionate about, the cause that they're passionate about, whatever, that passion will carry the day, but it doesn't. You have to have competence. You have to have the ability to organize, etc. There was talking about Martin Luther King, and a quote from the book was, MLK came to understand that righteousness without skilled organizing, action without strategy, was a recipe for letting the cause down. That, even MLK had these events in his life where he had total failures. He had campaigns like the one in St. Augustine that didn't produce anywhere near what he wanted to, and he took those failures and continued to work through them. And I was thinking about, both of these going back to our Chuck Norris. I should have a Chuck Norris joke ready for you guys. Every time I bring up Chuck Norris, I'll give you one. Chuck Norris doesn't have a flush on any of his toilets because he just scares the crap right out of them. All right. So, but Chuck Norris talked about how he would win the city championship and then win the county, and then what is the next thing that he could accomplish? And you see that in Florence Nightingale and MLK as well. And it's kind of that thought about punching through the target. If you ever learn any fighting arts, one of the first things you learn is you're not trying to punch them in the nose, you're trying to punch them in the back of the head. You're not trying to punch them in the throat, you're trying to punch them through the back of their spine. Same thing is like, are you in actions now to only accomplish the next thing? Or are you doing that thing in a way that it sets you up to win in the future? And then one last thing today that I didn't know, that I thought was a thing you could learn today too, is there was a man named Raphael Lemkin. This is the last thing I read, so I didn't get a chance to look into him deeply. But he was a writer writing about all of the horrors in Europe leading up to World War II, the Armenian genocide, but there wasn't a word genocide then. I didn't know this. Did you know that we didn't use the term genocide until the 1940s? It's because Raphael Lemkin was trying to tell Churchill what was happening as these soldiers would just mow through cities. And there wasn't a word for it. It's, two Latin words put together, and it was created in 1945 to communicate what was actually happening on the ground. We didn't have a word for those horrors. And so as a result, You know, I figured with all of these enormous campaigns and killing of other people groups across the millennia, but you just assume genocides have happened forever. They have. We just didn't have a word for it. And in whatever you're doing, I think the thing to take away from that is whatever you're saying might not be communicating the other person. That until he changed his words, well, literally changed the English language, but he changed his words and it changed what he communicated. And maybe all you need to do is change the way you're communicating something and you might get a totally different result. Anyway, that was the things I learned today. Hope to see you back here tomorrow.